Welcome to the Keptn community meeting. Today is December 16th, and today we do our first attempt to host the meeting in Bevy. So it's basically community CNCF IO portal. And if you haven't joined yet, consider joining because we intend to host all future meetings there. Okay. Let me share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so what do we have in the agenda? So thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, we start from holiday present. Who would like to talk about it?
Yeah, I can give you a few words about that. Since Christmas is around the corner for many countries, then we thought about giving you a small present, pre-release of Keptn 012, which the highlights are mainly two. For the core side, we are working towards have a better support for zero downtime upgrades and high availability. And for the bridge, the major highlight is that now it's possible to pick data from an event via the UI like it was possible for the secret. So it should be more easy to fill in your payload in the webhook. And the full release of 012 will come most likely around the beginning of next year. As you might see, we have a lot of bug fixes to polish the experience of Keptn. So if you are a brave sailor, please try it out and let us know if it improves your experience or not.
Thank you. Definitely a lot to try. So, and yeah, for my information, if I want to try out a preview, how do I do that? Use classic approaches, or is there anything specific?
Yes, good question. You shouldn't do the normal approach because the Keptn install or upgrade commands is not supported. You should install Keptn via Helm. At the bottom of the quick start guide, there is a description how you can upgrade or install Keptn via Helm directly, and you should follow that.
This one?
Yes, at the very bottom on the FAQ, if you scroll a bit, yeah, you see those three commands. If you go a bit up.
This one's, sorry.
Yep, no worries.
Okay, so?
And basically
Yes.
download from the release page the Helm charts, replace the URL with the correct ones or with the local Helm chart that you just downloaded, and then fire the command.
Nice, and all artifacts are here for all the platforms. So, great, thanks for that. I'll probably create an action item for myself to document upgrade flow somewhere for experimental releases.
Good point, thanks.
No. Yeah, and thanks for that. Any other comments regarding this holiday present?
Not at the moment.
Yeah, I believe that we also had 11.3 released since the previous meeting.
Yes, you're right. We released it last week. The major improvements there are some fixes, especially for OpenShift, where we were using too many permissions. Since OpenShift is more restrictive, we change a bit the configuration service.
And this release is also available here. Most bug fixes. Yeah, thanks a lot for doing that. So I already tried out 11.3 and yep, it works for me. So hopefully we will get more adoption for it. Okay. Anything else about the releases?
Not on my side.
And Johannes had a topic about Cap 60. So Johannes, would you like to take over?
Yeah, I would like to take over, please. All right. Yeah. What I would like to mention or tell you about is, first, let's take a look at the roadmap. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. You see that there are Keptn enhancement proposals in progress for 0.12, and a couple of ones were finished for 0.11, and the bigger items there are robustness, quality, and scalability improvements. And as Giovanni mentioned before, it's all about also providing capabilities for zero downtime upgrades and high availability of Keptn. This will definitely also be part of upcoming releases, as still some work is needed to be done here. But what I would like to also mention right now is that we kicked off work in respect to role-based access control, and this is here formulated in CAP 60. Please take a look at this CAP also to follow the discussions there or the ideas. And I would like to tell you, please feel free to read through the CAP by your own. But I would like to show you that the first chunk of tickets and issues that are tackled are those that support are used or are needed for supporting OIDC, which is an OAuth.2 implementation. And these are the items that we will focus on at the beginning. OpenID Connect is, an additional layer on top of OAuth 2.0, and it allows you to identify the end user based on the authentication server, and it also then gives back the information which permissions this user has. And at the end, we will need these permissions in order to get access to the API. And this picture should also give you a high-level overview of what we are focusing on right now. It's really implementing this OIDC flow, which is the connection between an OIDC provider and components that are then talking to the Keptn API, and those components are the Keptn CLI, the bridge, as well as the distributor. And issues and epics are then linked here. And I took a look at the notes and saw that we already see an implementation of an issue today. And in the next upcoming release meetings, more will then be talked about this topic as we make progress in this direction. Okay, are there questions on that piece?
Works for me. Yeah, it's nice that we have this layer, because then we will be able to connect basically any authentication engine. So.
Right, true. And for example, then it's possible to connect a Keycloak. GitHub has also OIDC support, or the most prominent tooling or framework out there is Okta. And there are quite a lot of OIDC providers.
Yeah, GitLab also supports OIDC, so for GitLab shops. So, and basically it becomes a standard these days. So it's nice.
Right, yeah. Okay, this was it from my side.
Okay, then what's next on the agenda? CLA, DCO, and other topics. So maybe I'll screen share, but just for a few minutes. So while we are talking about the roadmap, quick updates what changed since we had a discussion 2 weeks ago. So as we discussed, I started putting community-related items to Keptn roadmap. So how it works, basically I always use community label. And if there is some confusion, please let me know so we can think how to represent it better. But for now, in addition to technical roadmap, there are also some items related to the community. And most of these items reside in the old Keptn community repository. So again, if you have any idea how it could be improved, and well, basically whatever things related to community management, events, outreach programs, please feel free to put them here, and then we can process them over time. Also, you may see that there are some pinned issues here, and same for Keptn. So I basically added it for better navigation. And if you see whether they could be also added to showcase roadmap to end users, just do that because it would be also helpful. Okay, so back to the more technical topic. I actually have a suggestion to drop DCO entirely and probably to replace it with EasyCLA. It's a new service provided by the Linux Foundation for member projects. So I started voting in Slack, and if you have opinion, please comment because it would be nice. And for me, the main use case for that is to allow easy editing from the web interface, or from elsewhere, so that you don't have to care about DCO. You don't have to force push if you somehow make a mistake. And instead of that, we can use EasyCLA, which is also quite handy. So it's basically the same as other checks, just that's so it's one of my examples from previous experiments. And here, how it happens, you just have a GitHub app, which adds additional branch protection. And also, if the check doesn't pass, it provides command and guidelines how to register. And once it's you're registered, everything is done. And you need to do it only once for multiple GitHub organizations. So we can have basically a single CLA for all Keptn GitHub orgs. And after that, it should be more convenient for contributors who want to submit more pull requests, especially when editing things with GitHub. Because last week I messed up it up maybe several times. So what do you think about that? So far we have votes only for basically trying out EasyCLA. Are there any supporters for DC overflow? No, nobody likes DCO, right?
It's more
So,
convenient to sign once an agreement and then forget about that.
Yes, that's my approach too. So I reached out to the CNCF to get confirmation that they're fine with projects using EasyCLA. I'm pretty sure they're fine because there are projects using that in the CNCF. But once we have official sign-off, if no objections, I will set up a proof of concept in a few repositories, and then we can expand it. And yeah, another things related to the contributing flow. So you may have seen that there were some updates in tutorials, but also there were updates in contributor guidelines. Basically, I started documenting non-code contributions, including documentation, just advocacy and outreach to extend the channel we created, and basically the same for internship and mentorships. So if you see any other kinds of contributions which would be helpful for the project, like for example, design, etc., again, please submit a ticket for me, so I will try to get it added. And I will continue working so that we can aggregate all the contributing guidelines, because sometimes it's not trivial to find them. And yeah, hopefully we could extend code contributions too. We have a lot of things, for example, for Keptn Core, but for services, etc., the documentation is really scattered. So maybe we could aggregate that and update the page a bit more. So any feedback from developers would be appreciated, so that I can keep working on this documentation before I try developing something on my own. So basically, that's all from me. And yeah. So if there are no questions, the next is Christian.
Thank you. Is this the right screen? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been working on a lot of Keptn contrib and Keptn sandbox stuff. And the first one I want to show you is an extension of the GitHub automation repository that we have, that Moritz has started. So Moritz has started out like with a DCO workflow in here, and we've now extended it with a validate semantic PR workflow, a pre-release integration, a release integration workflow, and a Docker build action. And if you're wondering what all of this means, this is basically GitHub action stuff, and not just stuff, but reusable stuff. This means in this repository, we will have the only source of truth for GitHub automation, for GitHub actions that we should be using in all Keptn, Keptn Contrib, and Keptn Sandbox repositories. Obviously, customizations are always allowed and will always be needed, but this is basically where we want to collect the core maintained things. And with that, I want to show you actually how do we use it. And one example is the job executor service. So I'll actually start with the CI workflow. The CI workflow is just triggered when we push something to the default branch or when we create a pull request to the default branch. And it consists of a prepare step that has always been there. Don't worry too much about it. But where it gets cool now is unit tests. So unit tests is something you need at 3, 4, 5 different places. So you need it in your CI, you need it when you do a pre-release, you need it when you do a release, you could even have a cron job running, I don't know, every now and then to do it. But there is many places where you need it. And here is the first cool automation or the first cool enhancement that we have. We can reuse action from the same repository. So here we have in the same repository the unit tests action. And this one actually contains the code, how do we execute unit tests? And this is the one that each repository will probably have to customize, right? But this is one line or maybe 2 steps, right, that you need to customize depending on what you're using, if you're using Go or something else. And in the CI, you just say unit tests. Don't care what it is, just run them. And the second cool enhancement here is then the Docker build. So you probably have seen GitHub actions where you need to do the login, and the login depends on certain parameters, like is it a pull request, is it locally, is it an external fork or whatever, should we push a version, should we push a pre-release version, whatever. All of that is now essentially hidden in this Keptn GitHub automation action, which we released today actually. And the only thing you need to tell this action is how should my Docker image be called, like in this case it's in the Docker organization, it has a name, and what version does it have or what tag does it have, and some parameters like the registry user and registry password. And this even goes as far as what if you need to build multiple containers, like job executor has 2 containers, fine, then just use this action again and use a different image name and use a different Docker file. So it could even be something that long-term we will see in Keptn Core. I will have to sync with Moritz with that regarding that matter, because there are some limitations, obviously, that Keptn might have to, well, bypass somehow, but I think this is a good way going forward. And last but not least, we have the pre-release and the release action, workflow. So for instance, here, we have the pre-release workflow, which uses a pre-release workflow from Keptn GitHub Automation. And with that workflow, you essentially just get a pre-release on GitHub. And whatever you do afterwards is, again, up to the repository. So here we do a Docker build again, but then we also do a Helm chart build. And by the way, Helm chart means you get a file at the end and you want to add this file to release. So you can use the GitHub CLI to do that, like GitHub release upload, the release tag, and the file. So essentially, we're trying to make really, really small building blocks that are super easily reusable. And I think so far, this is looking quite promising. All right, any questions regarding this? Cool. I have the Keptn Contrib Job Executor Service pull request linked here. So if you're interested in the details, you can take a look at this pull request. Then I have made several bug fixes for Prometheus service. I've linked each of them here. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's way too much detail in them, but the short version is that the remediation features of Keptn with Prometheus service haven't been working properly for quite some time, and that querying certain metrics also did not work properly. And a couple of smaller bug fixes are also included there.
Should we do a retrospective at one of the next meetings just to see what's missing, so that we can ensure that it's being tested at least for major releases? Because my guess is that yeah, we could have better test automation for that, maybe some checklist for tutorials, I don't know. But yeah, it would be nice that we prevent such issues in the future, because Prometheus is one of important use cases for Keptn. And it would be great to ensure that it's working.
I don't know what to say. You're right, yeah, but this is not like 5-minute task. This is like
that's
a
for sure.
a 5-week task if you want to do it properly, and it hasn't been done in the past. So
yeah, I'm not
I really
proposing
can't say anything about it.
to do it right away, just to ensure that we have a discussion what we need to do, maybe create some follow-up tickets, and then we can see how, when, and whether to do it. So just for that, I don't propose to fix it right away at all.
Yeah, I don't think the community meeting is the right way to discuss this. We should take this offline, please.
Okay.
Any more questions? Okay, last but not least, with all this automation that we've shown before, we are also getting a cool building block, which is called automated building of Helm charts. And this now means that the Prometheus service can also be installed using a Helm chart. I've laid out the command for one of the pre-releases here. It's basically the same as some people already have seen with the Dynatrace service, and obviously with Keptn. So this is really just a long overdue, let's say, feature that we now have to install it using Helm. And it will in the future help us to maintain the installation of Prometheus service on a cluster much easier than before, because no more kubectl apply. And with that, I already spoiled something. We have a pre-release of all those bug fixes for Prometheus available, but I'm still working on verifying if the release is working as intended. So please allow some time for the final release of Prometheus service. It should come around like next week.
Thanks a lot for all your help, because yeah, all these issues, yeah, there is a lot of issues here and there, and yeah, Kirotech depends on that. Many users go through that. So yeah, all your support is much appreciated.
You're welcome. And with that, I'll hand it over to Giovanni. You're still muted?
Yes, sorry. Classical mistake. So I wanted to tell the community that we are working towards a definition of what is a breaking change for Keptn when it comes to REST endpoints. And for that, I create the following PR, and I would like the community to have a look, have a review, and provide some feedback on this. But the general idea is that every time we touch an endpoint, which is publicly available, so it's not marked as internal, every time we change that endpoint in terms of URL, adding some mandatory fields, changing the data model, then this is considered a breaking change. And also, every time we change our cloud event definition for event, so for endpoints that support cloud events, then this is also a breaking change. So bottom line, please have a look, provide some feedback, and finally, we have an agreement of what is a breaking change in terms of REST API. Any questions so far? Looks like no. And with that, I hand over to Florian.
All right, thank you. Let me just just share my screen real quick. So I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so where's the document? Here it is. Okay, today I want to discuss 3 items. So the first one was a research ticket that I've worked on for the configuration service. So the background for that is our current implementation of the configuration service was doing its job, and it was doing it for quite some time, but oftentimes we ran into, for example, performance problems when you had an upstream repository defined and you needed, and you executed a lot of sequences right after another and needed to pull the latest state from the upstream repository every time, or that was the way the configuration service was working. And of course, this might, for example, lead to the problem that you get into rate limit problems with the upstream repository that you use, for example. Another big issue is that this service is not really suited yet for having multiple replicas running at the same time, because the reason for that is that it basically has a persistent volume mounted to it, where it stores the repositories, so the directories for the repositories of the projects that are created within Keptn. And for multiple replicas, you would need to basically attach to the same volume, which is not possible on all Kubernetes platforms to begin with, because you need some sort of distributed file system support, which is not available anywhere. So that's also not ideal. Therefore, during the last sprint, Anna, Andre, and I worked on some research issues to see how we can tackle those problems. Actually, the one I've worked on was first how to enable having multiple replicas of the configuration service running at the same time. So to do that, we are about to make the Git upstream repository mandatory. I think that was mentioned already in one of the past community meetings. And by having this single source of truth in the upstream repository, we can now have multiple replicas of the configuration service running. So actually, we don't even need persistent volume anymore, but we can use empty dir storage within each of the replicas of the configuration service. And basically, when it tries to fetch data for a project, it will try to clone from the upstream, and if it's there, it can then take off from that latest state. And yeah, another implementation detail of the old configuration service was that it was using the Git CLI within the container, which is also not really that ideal, because for error handling, we had to parse the CLI output of Git, etc. And therefore, we also tried to look for alternatives. So for this first proof of concept, we were using the Go-Git library, which was for the most part working quite well, except one limitation, because the pull method provided by this library cannot actually handle fast forward and non-fast forward updates coming in from the upstream. So in that case, we unfortunately will have to either fall back to the CLI, or we have to look for another alternative, such as the go to Git binding, as Bernd suggested, which we might also use. Anyway, the result of this research ticket is a draft pull request, where I've implemented the concepts I've described right now. And this can be then used as a kind of reference for the proper implementation of the new version of the configuration service. Another cool thing maybe that also is part of this draft PR is that during the integration tests that we execute on GitHub, this draft PR also installs Git-T at the beginning of the Keptn setup. Internal Git-E instance used as a repository for the projects that are created during the integration. All right, are there any questions about that? All right, if not, then let's continue. So the next one is also about the configuration service. So this was a fix that was necessary. So basically, as Giovanni mentioned, in 11.3, we had to do some changes to the configuration of the configuration service, which also involved using a different file system group, because the one we previously were using was not supported by default in certain OpenShift environments, especially. But that in turn led to the problem that the projects that are created with 11.3 have a different file system group than the ones with 11.2, or all versions smaller than 11.3. And that led to some incompatibilities. And what we have done to address that is we have reintroduced the init container that basically runs as a privileged user and changes the owner group of the complete data config directory, where the configuration volume hosts its directories for the Git repositories. But we made that one optionally. So if you do have the requirement of not having any containers run with root access, you can disallow this init container to be run and deactivate it. And then the file system group is also made configurable, because there is no one solution that fits all environments. So we rather give the users the option to provide the value for the file system group that is to be used within the configuration service. And so this init container, if it is executed, will make sure that all the projects within the data config directory will be part of the same owner group, and therefore this will resolve any incompatibilities which have been introduced with 11.3. All right, are there any questions about that? If not, let me conclude with the last one. So this is actually up for discussion, and also is about OpenShift. So what's the background here? We have this OpenShift root service living in our repository, and if the shipyard controller is the brain of Keptn, then this service is the appendix. So it didn't really do anything for the last I think over a year, and it was never touched. Recently, we got some pain from it because it was indeed causing problems when someone tried to install it actually on OpenShift. And I've looked at actually did previously. So basically, it was needed for supporting the blue-green deployment strategy for the continuous use case. Continuous delivery use case out of the box, because what it did pretty much was setting up the permissions for Istio to be injected into the namespace that is created for the project that Keptn is about to deploy. But the problem is here that this actually requires enhanced privileges for the OpenShift route service. So it needs some cluster admin rights to set up the security context for the namespaces that are created. So actually this might not be favorable to have in a production setting. And anyway, since this issue that I mentioned actually just popped up recently, which means that this was the first time for a long time that actually this service was supposed to be installed. I think by now it has become obsolete, but I would like to also hear other opinions on that. Maybe we can further discuss this also in another meeting, because this might be out of scope of that community meeting. But anyway, are there any questions about that? If not, I will hand over to the next person to present.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay, so I worked on some smaller bridge issues and on mockups for the last 2 weeks. So first of all, I built in a validation for special characters for payload because they cannot be processed with the webhook service. So they are now validated, and the form is invalid if you enter some of them. So we can try it out as like, I don't know, for example, ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and this. The message shows that this is forbidden, and it it's not allowed, and we have to remove it. Also, if we try to fill out the rest of the form, we can see it's still disabled after we removed it, and everything is fine again. So, yeah, just to prevent some weird errors on the webhook side. Good. Then I also increased, so this is more of like a quality of life improvement. I also increased the field size, or I made it a text area for the URL field. So if we put in a really long URL, for example, that one, you can see I can now expand it to have the full picture instead of what it was again before, that it was really cut and not really editable. With this issue, I also did a bit of rework of the whole form, so it now looks a bit more cleaned up and aligned and stuff. What I also built in is a hint that secrets are shared among projects. So for this, it's just text that was added to the secret screen here. And also if I add a secret, this hint still persists here. And one is missing. No. There it is. I also added this description for the secrets in the webhook configuration, that only the secrets from this Keptn webhook service scope can be used. So it shows up if I click here and try to add a secret, there will be an information bubble that only these secrets can be referenced. So if I go here, delete this one, and view this again, it's more prominent. So it says that only scope Keptn webhook service can be used basically, and how to configure these sort of secrets basically. So the bigger issue I worked on was a mockup for triggering a sequence from the bridge. So And this is basically the outcome for this bigger mockup. So I did this in Figma and we'll just go through really quick. So the idea is to trigger sequence directly from the environment screen. Also, if you go to the sequences, you can also click it here and will be redirected to the environment screen. So depending on what you choose, you get the proper fields that are necessary to configure the sequence that you want to start. For example, for evaluation, you can use timeframes, start, end time, and so on. And if you trigger the sequence, you will land here and will see the sequence that has been triggered. So the mockup can be reviewed on these issues. So if you go to Keptn issues 4507, there are two variants linked here. I won't spoil anything, so I would ask also the community, if you haven't voted yet, take a look at the mockups and give your vote here. And I would really appreciate that because it's a short A/B test, and I'm more sure about what the right choice would be. With this issue, I also did something a bit more. I basically built a small Figma component library for Keptn for reusability issues. So as you can see here, I added a lot of components to Figma. So Figma is, I don't know if you're familiar with it. This is a prototyping and mock-up tool, basically. And yeah, I added basic components, then components for specific screens, for example. And if we go to the Keptn, so this is my Keptn mock, basically mockup file. So if I go here and view the library, you can see there, I can just drag in components and configure them just to be a bit faster in future for the next mockups that are coming up. So that's all from my side.
I would have a question on the last point. Is this library made open source yet?
Open source not. It's available in the organization. I have to check how to make this public.
Yeah, we can add it to the resources of Keptn.
Would be a good opportunity.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I think the next one is Klaus.
Yep. So, which screen? This one. Oh, okay. Can you see my screen? Okay. So, topic file bridge. We now have a feature for OpenID Connect. So you can now enter a provider like Google or Yahoo or something like that and use that for authentication in the bridge. There are some additional environment variables, for example, just to enable the sign-on via OpenID, then the base URL that is then used for the redirect, the discovery, like the one from the identity provider, the client ID that is also provided by the identity provider, and the secret, because you have to create the application to identify to the provider you're using. And then also the algorithm, because there also needs some validation which algorithm the ID token that is returned should be, and also a name property. This is used for the user panel in the bridge to identify the user. So this can be manually changed, or we in the bridge we just use the name, the nickname, or email. So if the one is not available, the next one is taken. Yeah. I can show a quick example. If you access now the bridge, wait, this one. Okay. Yeah. I'm immediately redirected to Yahoo. Here I can then log in with my password. And then I'm redirected to the bridge again. And yeah, I'm logged in with my user. Yeah. And if I also log out, this could be changed, I guess, because the session is cleared, but then because you are at the main screen, you are then already redirected to your provider, to the SSO provider, and because you are already logged in, there's immediate redirect to the bridge, and you are logged in again. Maybe we can introduce a logout page or something like that. Then, yeah, and that's basically it. So the future with the OpenID. Any questions to that? If not, then I will hand over to Anna.
Thank you. Actually, I have very tiny things because, as Florian mentioned, we were working on figuring out the configuration service. One thing that has been done is that we had a mistake in the Lighthouse. When the SLI provider was failing, we were not failing. This is now being fixed. So if we received a fail result, the whole things will be failed and the sequence will not proceed. And then a little feature I sneak in is that when there are some SLO in the file which are actually not SLI that are not specified, and in SLO we show them as a message in the evaluation, so that if the user doesn't realize that there is something wrong, he will see it here now. Then another tiny thing is that adding the problem title to remediation sequence for the sequence endpoint. I think this will be more visible and understandable why it is useful in the bridge side. And finally, another tiny thing, which I don't even have a cluster on to show, is now we are returning the value used for the comparison and in the Lighthouse instead of recalculating it in the bridge. And this will be used in the bridge for more accurate explanation of what happened in the background to the Lighthouse service. That's it.
Thank you. So, any other updates or topics we need to discuss today? Then, thanks everyone. Have a nice Christmas. I'm not sure, are we doing the meeting in 2 weeks on December 30th? Or in 1 week on December 23rd?
That's now a good question. Are we going to host the meeting next Thursday?
Yeah, next Thursday will be available for sure. In 2 weeks, if needed, I will be available too.
Yeah, I assume that many of the Keptn core team are on holiday. Then let's skip the meeting on the 3rd or 30th of December. And the 6th of January is actually a public holiday in Austria as well. But I would propose that we continue then on the 13th of January. This means next week we having the meeting, and then the next one will be 13th of January.
And speaking of meetings, on 21st at 4 p.m. UTC, we will have Keptn user group. There we will have Kirotech presenting their use cases and the experiences with Keptn. I guess there will be a lot of discussions about Prometheus use case because this is the main objective at the moment. So if you're interested, please join, and yeah, I'll try to do a small Christmas update with a summary of main achievements in the past year for Keptn. So I will share the slide deck in advance, and if anyone wants to contribute, it will be much appreciated. Okay, so that's it. And yeah, thanks everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Enjoy your holidays.
Bye.
Thank you.